Ladies and gentlemen, all rise, for the court of public jazz opinion is now in session. I'm gonna make a case to you today that your favorite bebop musicians, your favorite jazz musicians, are probably thinking less than you are when you solo. I will make an ironclad argument in defense of my position, and at the end, you, the jazz jury, will decide whether I'm right or whether I should just go back to practicing alone in a room and not bothering you anymore. That's what we're going to talk about today, and we are going to use some vocabulary from the GOAT, Charlie Parker, to see how maybe he's doing that exact thing. And that might be one of the secrets to his incredibly natural lines and his amazing, flawless phrasing. Now, this concept is really nothing new. In fact, one of the greatest bebop teachers who ever lived, Barry Harris, talks about this all the time. Particularly over 2-5-1s, he says, hey, just get rid of the 2 chord and only think about 5 going to 1. And actually, it's this exact concept that we're going to talk about today. Because if over the 2-5, we can literally eliminate 50% of the things that we have to think about, we might just stand a chance to turn off our brain enough to actually play something musical. So it's important to note that Barry Harris, on top of being like such an incredible teacher, he was also one of the greatest bebop players who ever lived. And these bebop artists like Charlie Parker and Bud Powell, anybody else that you can think of, they were his contemporaries. He knew them, he played with them. So this idea of removing the 2 chord, it wasn't just like a theoretical thing he came up with afterward, I don't think. I think he actually put this into action, and I'm sure this idea resulted from talking to a lot of those musicians about the way that they play and approach this music. So really, when we hear that, we should take it very, very seriously. And I want to examine 4 different Charlie Parker lines to show you that I think he may have been doing this exact thing, at least in certain cases. I would never say that, like, I know what Charlie Parker is thinking. I have no idea. But I'm just going to present some evidence to you in the form of actual Charlie Parker phrases and show you that through looking at these phrases, I think that it's pretty abundantly clear that he could have been just thinking about the 5 chord. And of course, that means he probably wasn't only simplifying in that situation, but probably in a lot of others as well. All right, let's dive into line number 1. This is from his solo on Confirmation. It's a 3-6-2-5 in the key of concert F. Pretty sweet line, right? Most of us probably think in terms of bebop, which is not really a bad thing to think. It's actually a really good thing to think. Hey, maybe the first note I should play over a chord should be a chord tone, because that's really harmonically clear, it keeps me close to the changes, and it gives me a great sounding note to begin the line on. All those are great, great things to think. But do you notice on this line, over the concert A minor 7 chord, Charlie Parker actually plays F sharp as the first note. Not a chord tone. It's the 6th over that A minor 7 chord. So what gives? Well, here's where the evidence comes in that I think he was actually thinking about D7 already. And he was probably thinking about D7 for the whole bar. Because look at the first 4 notes. What that actually is over a D7 chord, it's 3-5-7 flat 9, or a diminished arpeggio based off of the 3rd of D7. Something interesting to think about, isn't it? Because actually, if you study Charlie Parker's music and you transcribe a lot of his music, which I've been doing a lot of lately, you'll notice that there's actually a couple of non-chord tones over the 2 chord that he starts on very often. But before we get into that, let's look at another one that I think expresses the 5 chord in a bit of a different way. So this is a 2-5 in the key of concert D from his solo on Scrapple from the Apple. Okay, so if we look at the first note over the 2 chord, over the E minor 7 chord, it is in fact a chord tone. It's the 7. And then in fact, he moves to another chord tone, which is the 5th. But look what happens next. This is really, really interesting. So the chord of the moment is an E minor 7 chord, but what is Charlie Parker doing? He's perfectly outlining an A7 arpeggio. That is 3, 5, 7, 1 of A7. So that's really interesting. He is very explicitly outlining all 4 chord tones of an A7, but he's doing it over an E minor 7 chord. Very interesting. All right, let's move on to the 3rd line here. So this is from his solo on a tune, She Rote. And I've been loving this tune lately, and I've been transcribing a whole bunch of Bird over this. This one caught my ear. This is a 2-5-1 in the key of concert B flat. All right, so let's look at the first note over the concert C minor 7 chord. Weird, it's not a chord tone. It is in fact the 4th of that chord. It's a concert F over a C minor 7 chord. But let's think about the 5 chord. It's F. It's almost as if when he came to the downbeat of that, he was already thinking about F7. And remember how in the first line I mentioned that he very often uses these non-chord tone notes over the 2 chord? This is the other one. So very often he uses the 6th over the 2 chord. He starts his phrase on there. That's the first note you hear over the 2-5-1. And then very often he starts on the 4, which is this note. So what is the 6 over the 2 chord? It's the 3rd of the 5 chord. And what is the 4 over the 2 chord? It's the 1 of the 5 chord. And I'm telling you, he does this all the time. So, the evidence is starting to add up a little bit here, huh? Okay, let's look at one more line. This is from his solo on Coco, and it's a 2-5-1 in the key of concert E flat. All right, now some of you might be sitting there going, I see it, I see it. So what's on the downbeat of the 2 chord? A concert D over an F minor 7 chord. We've seen that before. Remember back in the first line? That note is the 3rd of the 5 chord. However, it's not a chord tone over the 2 chord. We see it again. Remember how I said this was kind of a pattern? Now, there's one other really, really strong move that suggests to me that he might not even be considering the 2 chord. And that is that the first 2 beats of this phrase, I think, are like a really big enclosure, and the target note is on beat 3. Well, what note is on beat 3? It's a concert B flat. Oh, B flat is the literal 5 in the key of E flat. So a big, huge concert B flat on beat 3 over the 2 chord? Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, that concludes my arguments that maybe, just maybe, somebody like Charlie Parker, the foremost voice in the bebop movement, might not actually be thinking about every chord. And the more I study bebop players and really, really tear apart their solos and play along with them, it becomes clear to me that probably most of them are simplifying a little bit. I think maybe the next case I have to present to you in the courtroom of YouTube is some really cool bebop solos over rhythm changes, because there we see it big time. We hear these phrases that really aren't considering all a chord every 2 beats. And if you think I presented my case fairly convincingly, this is really good news for you, because it means you don't have to think so hard. And I think most of us, when we feel our solos going in a direction that we don't want them to go, or we feel really overwhelmed and like we're not actually making music, but we're just like doing computations, I think studying the masters and understanding that they weren't always thinking about every chord is really, really important, because it allows us to turn our brains off, turn our ears and our instincts on, and rely on those a little bit more. And I think everybody, including myself, would be well served by relying on our ears, our instincts, and our musicality a little bit more. Okay, now it's all said and done, right? I've put my case out there. Now, here's where I wouldn't really make it as a lawyer. You can find plenty of cases where Charlie Parker's playing chord tones over the 2 chord. However, I do think that my argument still stands that in a lot of cases, he's not. And I think that it's okay for you to think less when you're playing, and that actually the results may totally and completely surprise you. So let me know how effectively I've presented my case to you, whether I should think about becoming a lawyer or I should keep my day job as a saxophonist. If you want to get your hands on those lines that we studied today, I'm gonna leave a link below where you can grab the PDF if you want to dissect them a little bit more, or do whatever you want with them. Thanks for hanging, and if you enjoyed this video, you're definitely going to like the one that's on screen right now. Talk to you soon.